I thought I was just a single mother trying to protect my disabled son from neighborhood bullies. But when my HOA started threatening us with legal action over our security measures, I had no idea I was about to uncover a conspiracy that reached all the way to the top. What started as harassment became extortion. What looked like community leadership was actually organized crime, and the man I trusted most. Well, let's just say the final twist in this courtroom drama will leave you questioning everything. You think you know about the people who live next door. My name is Sarah Chen, and 6 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was getting my autistic son Marcus through high school without another incident. I was wrong. Dead wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in March when I found Marcus sitting on our front porch, his laptop bag torn open, textbooks scattered across the walkway like fallen leaves. His glasses were cracked, hanging crooked on his face, and there was a cut on his lip that made my maternal instinct surge with a fury I'd never felt before. "What happened, sweetheart?" I knelt beside him, trying to keep my voice steady. Marcus rocked slightly, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "The Hendricks boys from Maple Street. They said I don't belong in this neighborhood. That people like me make property values go down. People like him, my brilliant, gentle son who could program computers better than most adults, who remembered every single detail about his favorite documentaries, who never hurt a soul in his 17 years of life." I helped Marcus inside and immediately called our HOA president, David Kellerman. We'd moved to Willowbrook Estates 2 years ago, specifically for the community's reputation for safety and inclusivity. The whole fees were steep, for $100 a month, but I thought it was worth it for Marcus's well-being. Mrs. Chen, Kellerman's voice was smooth, practiced. "I'm so sorry to hear about the incident. Boys will be boys, you know. I'm sure it was just rough play that got out of hand." Rough play. My grip tightened on the phone. They destroyed his schoolwork and physically assaulted him. Now, let's not be dramatic. I'll have a word with the Hendricks family, but these things have a way of working themselves out. Like my son's safety was some minor inconvenience that would resolve itself if ignored long enough. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Exec Protect, a personal security company I'd found online. Within 48 hours, a man named Tony Reeves was standing in my living room. He was in his mid-40s, former military, with the kind of presence that commanded respect without saying a word. "Mom, your son's been targeted," Tony said, reviewing the incident report I typed up. "This isn't random teenage behavior. This is systematic harassment. I've seen it before." "What do you mean?" "Someone's testing boundaries, seeing how much they can get away with. It usually escalates." Tony was right. Within a week, our mailbox was vandalized. Eggs were thrown at our windows. Marcus stopped wanting to walk to the bus stop alone. "I can provide discreet protection," Tony explained. "I'll be here when Marcus comes home from school. Escort him to community events if needed, and maintain a visible presence to deter further incidents." The cost was significant, $200 a day, but Marcus's safety was worth everything I had. For 3 weeks, it worked perfectly. Tony would arrive each afternoon at 2:30, just before Marcus got home. He'd stay until evening, helping Marcus with his computer programming projects, teaching him basic self-defense, becoming not just a bodyguard, but a mentor. Then the whole letters started arriving. The first one was formal, but relatively polite. "It has come to our attention that you may be operating a business from your residential property, which violates Section 12.4 of the Community Covenant." I called Kellerman immediately. "This is ridiculous. I'm not running a business. I've hired protection for my son because he's being bullied. Mrs. Chen, I understand your concerns, but having unknown individuals on the property on a regular basis creates liability issues for the community. Perhaps we could discuss alternative solutions." "Alternative solutions? Like what, exactly?" "Well, there are excellent residential facilities that specialize in caring for children with special needs, places where Marcus might be more comfortable with his own kind." His own kind. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. My son belongs in this community just as much as anyone else. Of course. I'm just trying to help you understand the broader picture here. The second letter arrived a week later. This one more aggressive. "Immediate cessation of business activities required. Failure to comply may result in legal action." or fines as outlined in community guidelines. The third letter was delivered by certified mail. Notice of covenant violation hearing scheduled for April 15th. Failure to appear will result in automatic fines of $500 per day until compliance is achieved. I spent that night researching HOA law, diving deep into legal websites and community forums. What I found terrified me. HOA letters have broad powers to enforce their covenants, including the ability to place liens on properties and even force sales, to recover fines. But something else bothered me about the whole situation. The timing felt too convenient, too coordinated. The bullying had started just weeks after we'd increased our community involvement, just after Marcus had joined the neighborhood book club and started making friends with some of the other kids. I started paying closer attention to the details. The Hendricks boys always seemed to know exactly when Marcus would be walking alone. The vandalism always happened when I was at work, never when Tony was around. It was like someone was feeding them information about our schedule the night before the HOA hearing. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard voices outside. Through the window, I saw David Kellerman standing at the end of our driveway with two other men I recognized from HOA meetings. The hearing is just a formality, Kellerman was saying. Once we establish the violation, we could start the fine process, should have them out within 60 days out. They wanted us out. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands shaking, as I realized this wasn't about HOA rules or liability concerns. This was about getting rid of us entirely. The next morning, I opened my door to find three men in suits standing on my porch. Behind them was a sheriff's deputy, looking uncomfortable, but official. Mrs. Sarachan, the lead man, had cold eyes and a briefcase. I'm attorney James Morrison from Coleman, Hayes and Associates. We represent the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. You're being served with papers for an emergency injunction requiring immediate cessation of all business activities on these premises. That's when Tony appeared beside me, his presence immediately shifting the entire dynamic of the encounter. Gentlemen, his voice was calm, but carried an edge that made all three lawyers take a step backward. I believe you'll want to review those papers very carefully before serving them. Attorney Morrison's confident expression wavered slightly. And you are? Someone who's very interested in this case, Tony replied, accepting the papers on my behalf. Mrs. Chen will see you in court. As the lawyers retreated to their car, I realized my fight was just beginning, but I was no longer fighting it alone. The emergency injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I had exactly 5 days to build a legal defense against what was essentially a neighborhood empire, with unlimited resources, and a team of attorneys who probably charged more per hour than I made in a week. That evening, Tony sat at my kitchen table reviewing the legal documents with the focus of someone reading a military intelligence report. This is sophisticated stuff, he said, highlighting several passages. They're not just claiming covenant violations. They're alleging you're running an unlicensed security business, creating a public nuisance. And here's the interesting part, potentially harboring individuals with criminal backgrounds. Harboring individuals with criminal backgrounds. They're talking about you. Tony's expression darkened. Sarah, there's something you need to know about me. I didn't tell you before because it wasn't relevant to protecting Marcus, but it might be now. My stomach dropped. What kind of something? I spent 15 years working private security for some very wealthy, very powerful people. Corporate executives, politicians, celebrities. The kind of people who make enemies just by existing. About 3 years ago, I uncovered evidence that one of my clients was involved in some illegal activities. When I tried to report it through proper channels, I found out the corruption went deeper than I'd imagined. He pulled out his phone and showed me a news article from 3 years ago. Private security executive testifies in federal fraud case. I was the whistleblower in a major federal investigation. Helped put some very connected people in prison. Made a lot of enemies in the process. So when they're talking about criminal backgrounds, they're trying to paint me as the criminal instead of the guy who exposed the criminals. It's a classic intimidation tactic. I stared at the legal papers spread across my table. Tony, are we in over our heads here? Not if we're smart about it. He leaned forward, his tactical mind clearly engaged. Here's what I think is really happening. This isn't about HOA covenants or property values. Someone doesn't want me in this neighborhood, and they're using you and Marcus to get rid of me. But why? You don't even live here. Because I'm asking Questions they don't want answered. Sarah, in the 3 weeks I've been here, I've noticed things. The Hendricks boys aren't just random bullies, they're being coordinated. Someone's directing them, timing their harassment for maximum impact, and your HOA president, Kellerman, he's got connections that go way beyond community management. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and started making phone calls. First, I contacted a lawyer, Jana Rodriguez, who specialized in HOA disputes and had good reviews online. Mrs. Chen, I have to be honest with you, Jana said during our consultation, fighting an established HOA is expensive and time-consuming. They have resources, relationships with local judges, and they're playing on their home field. Are you sure you want to go down this road? My son's safety isn't negotiable? Then we need to be strategic. The emergency injunction is just there. Opening move. They're hoping you'll fold immediately rather than fight. But if we can demonstrate that their actions are discriminatory or retaliatory, we might have leverage. Jana agreed to represent us for a $5,000 retainer. Money I didn't have, but found by emptying my small savings account and borrowing against my 401k. Meanwhile, Tony was conducting his own investigation. That afternoon, he came to me with a manila folder full of documents. I've been doing some research on your neighbors, he said. The Hendricks family moved here 18 months ago. Before that, they lived in 3 different states over 5 years. That's unusual for a family with teenage kids. What are you thinking? I'm thinking they're professional troublemakers. People who specialize in creating problems in communities, usually for someone else's benefit. He pulled out another document. And here's something interesting about David Kellerman. He's been HOA president for 6 years, but he's only lived in the community for 4 years. How do you get elected president of an HOA before you even move there? The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. Tony, what if this whole thing is bigger than just neighborhood harassment? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Thursday evening, Marcus came home from school unusually excited. Mom, you know how you said I should tell you if anything weird happened. Well, something weird happened, but it might be good weird. What do you mean? Sweetheart, you know Mr. Peterson from 3 houses down, the old man with the dog. He stopped me after school today and said he wanted to tell you something important. He said he has videos. My heart started racing. Videos of what? He said his security camera has been recording everything that happens on our street for the past 2 months, and he said what he's seen makes him very angry. That evening, Tony and I walked down to Mr. Peterson's house. Harold Peterson was 78 years old, a retired engineer who lived in Willowbrook Estates since it was first built. His small living room was dominated by multiple computer monitors showing feeds from 6 different security cameras around his property. I installed these after someone broke into my garage last year, Harold explained. But what I've been seeing in your direction has been disturbing. Let me show you. The first video showed the initial attack on Marcus. But what made my blood run cold was the timestamp, 3:47 p.m., and the figure standing in the background, partially hidden behind a tree, clearly watching the entire incident unfold. David Kellerman. He was there. I whispered. He was watching it happen. Gets worse, Harold said, queuing up another video. This is from last Tuesday night, the evening before your first HOA letter arrived. The footage showed Kellerman meeting with the Hendricks parents in Harold's front yard, just out of range of most cameras, but clearly visible from Harold's angle. They were passing something back and forth, documents, maybe money, and here's the kicker. Harold said, pulling up a third video. This is from 2 weeks ago. The video showed Kellerman and attorney Morrison standing together outside Kellerman's house, reviewing what looked like legal documents. 2 weeks before I'd ever been served with papers. They were planning this whole thing from the beginning, Tony said grimly. The harassment, the legal action, everything. I felt anger building in my chest like a physical fire. But why? Why? Target us specifically. Harold cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, I think I might know the answer to that, but you're not going to like it. He pulled out a folder filled with property records and tax documents. I've been doing some research since all this started. Your house, along with 4 others in this immediate area, sits on property that was rezoned for commercial development 6 months ago. If the current owners could be encouraged to sell, someone could make a very substantial profit. The room went silent as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. "They're not trying to enforce HOA rules," I said slowly. "They're trying to steal our homes." "Exactly." Harold nodded. "And they've been systematically targeting families they think will be easy to intimidate. Single parents, elderly residents, anyone they think won't fight back." Tony stood up, his expression grim with determination. "Well, they picked the wrong family this time." Friday morning, Jean called with news. "Sarah, I've reviewed the evidence your friend Mr. Peterson provided. This changes everything. We're not just fighting an HOA violation anymore. This is fraud, conspiracy, possibly even racketeering." "What does that mean for Monday's hearing?" "It means we're going on the offensive." Monday morning arrived with the weight of everything we discovered pressing down on me, like a physical force. I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to job interviews, and tried to project confidence I didn't feel. Marcus wanted to come with me, but I'd insisted he stay at school, where he'd be safe. The courthouse was exactly what you'd expect from a small suburban county seat: marble floors, high ceilings, and an atmosphere of institutional authority that made me feel small and out of place. Jean had met me in the hallway outside courtroom 3, her arms full of folders and her expression focused. "Remember," she said quietly, "they're expecting us to fold. They think we're just a single mother who got in over her head. Let them think that." For now, inside the courtroom, I was shocked by the show of force on the other side. Attorney Morrison wasn't alone. He brought two associates and what looked like a paralegal. Behind them sat David Kellerman, looking confident and dressed like he was heading to a corporate board meeting. Judge Patricia Williams took her seat at exactly 9 a.m. She was a woman in her early 60s with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and sob story imaginable. "This is an emergency hearing regarding the matter of Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association versus Chen," Judge Williams announced. "Mr. Morrison, you may proceed." Morrison stood up with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, this case represents a clear violation of community standards and HOA covenants. The defendant, Mrs. Chen, has been operating an unlicensed security business from her residential property, bringing unknown individuals with questionable backgrounds into a family neighborhood and creating a public safety hazard." He gestured toward a stack of documents. "We have photographic evidence of commercial vehicles parked at the residence, witness statements from concerned neighbors, and documentation of the defendant's refusal to comply with legitimate HOA requests." As Morrison spoke, I noticed something that made my stomach clench. Judge Williams was nodding along, taking notes, looking like she was buying every word. This wasn't going to be the fair hearing I'd hoped for. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "we have evidence that the individual providing these so-called security services has a history of involvement in criminal investigations and potentially dangerous associations." That was Tony's cue. He stood up in the gallery, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Your Honor," Tony said clearly, "I believe there's been a mischaracterization of the facts." Judge Williams looked surprised. "Sir, you're not party to this proceeding. Please sit down." Jana stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Mr. Tony Reeves as a witness." "This is highly irregular," Morrison objected. "This is an emergency injunction hearing, not a full trial." "Nevertheless," Judge Williams said, "I'll allow brief testimony. Mr. Reeves, please approach." Tony walked to the witness stand with military bearing. As he was sworn in, I noticed Kellerman shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Reeves," Jana began, "please tell the court about your professional background." "I'm a licensed private security professional with 15 years of experience protecting corporate executives and public officials. I'm also a federal witness who helped expose a major financial fraud scheme 3 years ago." Morrison was on his feet immediately. "Objection. This testimony is irrelevant to the matter at hand." "On the contrary," Jana replied smoothly, "it goes directly to the question of Mr. Reeves's character, which the plaintiff has called into question." "I'll allow it," Judge Williams said, though she looked skeptical. Tony continued, 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Chen hired me to provide protection for her 17-year-old autistic son, who was being systematically harassed and physically assaulted by neighborhood bullies. In the course of providing that protection, I observed behavior that suggested the harassment was being coordinated by adults." "What kind of behavior?" Jana asked. The attacks on Marcus Chen followed patterns. They happened at specific times, when certain adults would be in position to observe, but not intervene. The vandalism occurred on a schedule that coincided with home meeting dates, and I observed the HOA president, David Kellerman, present during at least one assault on Marcus Chen. The courtroom was dead silent. Kellerman was red-faced, whispering urgently to Morrison. Morrison stood up. "Your Honor, this is inflammatory. Speculation without foundation." "Actually," Jana said, pulling out a laptop, "we have video evidence." What happened next was like watching a dam burst. Jana played Harold Peterson's security footage on a portable screen, showing Kellerman watching Marcus get attacked, meeting secretly with the Hendricks family and coordinating with Morrison. Weeks before any legal action was filed, Judge Williams's expression changed completely as she watched the videos. "Mr. Morrison, can you explain why your client was present during an assault on a minor?" Morrison was scrambling. "Your Honor, we haven't had time to review this evidence. We request a continuance too, and can you explain why you were meeting with Mr. Kellerman 2 weeks before any HOA violation was reported?" But Jana wasn't finished. "Your Honor, we have additional evidence that this harassment is part of a broader conspiracy to force residents from their homes for commercial development purposes." She handed the judge a thick folder of documents. Property records show that Mrs. Chen's home and several others in her immediate area were rezoned for commercial development 6 months ago. The individuals being targeted for HOA violations are the exact homeowners whose properties would need to be acquired for that development to proceed. The judge spent several minutes reviewing the documents in silence. When she looked up, her expression was grim. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to ask you directly, is your client involved in any commercial development project that would benefit from the removal of current homeowners?" Morrison looked like a man drowning. "Your Honor, we would need time to, that's..." When David Kellerman made his crucial mistake, he stood up and started walking toward the exit. "Mr. Kellerman," Judge Williams's voice cracked like a whip, "you will remain in this courtroom. I don't have to listen to these accusations," Kellerman said, his calm facade finally cracking. "This whole thing is ridiculous. These people don't belong in our community anyway." The words hung in the air like a confession. "Bailiff," Judge Williams said quietly, "please ensure Mr. Kellerman doesn't leave the courthouse. I have some questions for him." But as the bailiff moved toward Kellerman, something happened that no one expected. Tony was suddenly on his feet, blocking Kellerman's path to the door. "David," Tony said calmly, "I think you should sit down and explain to the judge why you've been taking money from Meridian Development Corp. to harass your neighbors." Kellerman went white. "How did you? Because I know who you really are." Tony continued, "And I know this isn't the first community you've destroyed." The courtroom erupted. Morrison was objecting. Kellerman was backing toward the windows, and Judge Williams was banging her gavel for order. But I could see it in Kellerman's eyes, pure panic. This wasn't going according to plan. That's when he pulled out his phone and made a call that changed everything. "It's over," he said into the phone. "Activate the contingency plan." The words "activate the contingency plan" sent a chill through the courtroom. That had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Judge Williams immediately ordered the bailiff to confiscate Kellerman's phone. But the damage was already done. Whatever message he just sent was already in motion. "Your Honor," Jana said, her voice tight with concern, "I request immediate police protection for my client and her son." Judge Williams nodded grimly. "Bailiff, please contact the sheriff's department immediately." But Tony was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear. "Marcus should be in third period chemistry right now," he said to me. "I'm having him pulled from class and brought to a secure location." "What's happening?" I asked, though part of me was terrified to know the answer. "Sarah, this goes deeper than we thought. That contingency plan Kellerman just activated, it means they're willing to escalate beyond legal intimidation." Morrison was frantically trying to control the situation. "Your Honor, my client was clearly under duress. These allegations are completely unfounded, and we request..." "Mr. Morrison," Judge Williams interrupted, "your client just made what sounded like a threat in my courtroom after being confronted with evidence of an ongoing criminal conspiracy. I'm denying your injunction request and ordering a full investigation into these allegations. That should have been our victory moment. But something about Tony's expression told me we weren't safe yet." "Your Honor," Tony said, approaching the bench, "I have reason to believe that Mrs. Chen and her son may be in immediate physical danger. With your permission, I'd like to share some additional information that I've been holding back. Judge Williams looked at him carefully. Proceed. But make it quick. Tony pulled out a thick folder I'd never seen before. 3 years ago, when I exposed the financial fraud scheme I mentioned earlier, one of the companies involved was Meridian Development Corp. They specialize in acquiring residential properties through intimidation tactics, usually working through compromised HOA leadership. My blood went cold. Tony, how long have you known about Meridian? Since the first day I walked into your house, he admitted. Sarah, I didn't come to Willowbrook by accident. I've been tracking Meridian's operations for 2 years, trying to gather enough evidence to take them down permanently. The courtroom spun around me. You mean this was all a setup, but not the way you're thinking. Tony's voice was gentle but urgent. I was already investigating Meridian when you called Exec Protect. When I realized your situation matched their typical pattern, I knew I had to get involved. But everything I've done to protect you and Marcus has been real. Judge Williams was studying the documents Tony had provided. Mr. Reeves, these appear to be federal investigation files. How did you obtain these? Because I'm not just a private security contractor, Your Honor. I'm an undercover federal agent. The revelation hit the courtroom like a bomb. Morrison went pale. Kellerman, who had been sitting quietly since his phone was confiscated, suddenly looked like a trapped animal. Agent Reeves, Judge Williams continued. Are you saying this entire situation has been part of a federal investigation? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Chen and her son were genuine victims, but their case gave us the opening we needed to expose Meridian's entire operation. What we didn't expect was for the local conspiracy to be this extensive. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message that made my heart stop. Your son is safe. For now, drop all charges or he won't stay that way. I showed the message to Tony, whose expression turned deadly serious. Your Honor, we need to recess this hearing immediately. The threats against my client have escalated to kidnapping. But before Judge Williams could respond, her clerk rushed into the courtroom and whispered something in her ear that made her face go white. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Williams announced, I've just been informed that federal agents are executing search warrants at multiple locations throughout our county. This courtroom is now part of an active federal investigation. The doors burst open and 6 FBI agents entered, led by a woman in her 40s wearing a bulletproof vest over her business suit. Agent Patricia Vasquez, FBI, she announced, Mr. Kellerman, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and making terroristic threats. But as the agents moved to arrest Kellerman, he stood up with a smile that chilled me to the bone. You people have no idea what you've stumbled into, he said calmly. Meridian Development isn't just some small-time property scheme. We're connected to organizations that make the federal government look like a neighborhood watch committee. Agent Vasquez didn't look impressed. Mr. Kellerman, you have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. My son, I said urgently. Someone texted me a threat about my son. Marcus is secure, Agent Vasquez replied. We've had protective custody arranged since this morning. Agent Reeves kept us informed of the escalation. Tony, Agent Reeves, turned to me with an expression of profound regret. Sarah, I need you to know that while my assignment brought me here, everything between us became personal the moment I met you and Marcus. Protecting you wasn't just my job. It became the most important thing I'd ever done. Morrison was trying to distance himself from the chaos. Your Honor, I had no knowledge of any criminal activity. I was simply representing a client in a civil matter. Agent Vasquez held up a folder. Mr. Morrison, we have recorded phone conversations between you and Meridian Development dating back 8 months. You're going to want to call your own lawyer. The final twist came when Judge Williams called for order and made her ruling in the matter of Willowbrook Estates versus Chen. I'm not only denying the plaintiff's request for an injunction, I'm ordering the dissolution of the current HOA board and the appointment of an independent administrator. Furthermore, I'm recommending that the district attorney's office investigate potential criminal charges against all involved parties. She looked directly at me. Mrs. Chen, you and your son are free to live peacefully in your home. Anyone who attempts to interfere with that right will answer to this court. As the chaos died down and the various defendants were led away, Tony, Agent Reeves, approached me one more time. Sarah, the federal case against Meridian is going to take months to resolve, but your part in this is over. You and Marcus are safe. What happens to us now? I asked. You go home, You live your lives, and if you need anything at all, you call me, not as Agent Reeves, but as Tony, the guy who learned that protecting your family was more important than any case I've ever worked. 6 months later, Marcus graduated from high school with honors and a full scholarship to MIT. The new HOA, led by Harold Peterson, operates with complete transparency and genuine concern for residents' welfare. And Tony, Agent Tony Reeves, was reassigned to the FBI's white-collar crime division, where he still comes by every Sunday for dinner and to help Marcus with his college programming projects. Sometimes the good guys really do win. Sometimes justice actually gets served. And sometimes the person who walks into your life as a protector becomes the family you never knew you needed. The real twist wasn't the conspiracy we uncovered. It was discovering that in a world full of people trying to tear others down, there are still those willing to risk everything to build something better. Marcus was right from the beginning. Sometimes the weird thing that happens turns out to be the good weird thing after all.